Hi all, welcome to Learn Code Repeat. So today we'll be looking at insert interval problem, which is the day 13th of the September challenge. So the problem statement says given a set of non-overlapping intervals, insert a new interval into the intervals and merge if necessary. So what they have given, for example, is the interval is 1, 3 and 6, 9. So they have mentioned that it's a non-overlapping interval, and they have also mentioned that the intervals will be initially sorted. And there is a new interval 2 comma pi, so we have to find out whether this interval is overlapping. If it is overlapping, then we have to merge this interval. So in this case 1 2 3, right, 2 comma pi is overlapping with this first interval, so we have to take the lower bound of 1 3 and 2 5. So the lower bound is 1 and the upper bound, that is the max upper bound of 1 3 and 2 5. So we have to take min lower bound and the max upper bound where the intervals are merging, right? So the min lower bound will be 1 and the max upper bound will be 5. So in this case the output will be 1 5 for this, and since 6 comma 9 was not overlapping, we'll take 6 comma 9 as it is in the output. So let's look into the example 2. So this is the example 2 where we have the intervals 1 2 3 5 6 7 8 10 and 12 16, and the new interval is 4 comma 8. So I have indicated the new interval in red line and the intervals is in gray line. So if you see here, right, the problem statement, we can break it down into finding where the range needs to be merged and finding out the intervals that are not overlapping, because the intervals that are not overlapping we can take as is in my final array, right? So for that, how to find out whether the interval is not overlapping, right? So if you see, if I compare the end range with my start range of the new interval, right, you will see that the end range is always less than the start range of the new interval, right? If that is the case, then it is non-overlapping, right? So we'll take that condition, and until that condition is reached, those ranges we can add directly in our output array, right? So once that is done, whatever is the remaining range, right, that means that it is overlapping with my new interval, right? Of course there will be some range at the end that can be non-overlapping, right? So we can take care of that later on. So to merge these range, right, so that means if I just take care of only this particular section, right, so to merge this, if you observe, the output should be whatever is the min of my lower bound, right, that is my start range, whatever is the min of this part and this part, and whatever is the max of my end range, right, where the new interval is overlapping, right? So this part and this part, right? So here the min of this two will be 3 and the max of this two will be 10, right? So my final output will be 3 comma 10, which is here, right? So how can I find that, right? So once I reach this range, right, I can loop over this particular intervals, and I just need to keep track of, for each interval, what is the min of my start bound and what is the max. So let's take a pseudocode example of this merge. So here, right, my new interval, I'm declaring it in a temp array, and I'm looping over the remaining intervals that I have. So I'm making sure that my I is less than my intervals dot length, and also my end range should be greater than or equal to the start range, right? Only then it will be overlapping, right? If it is not greater than, then it won't be overlapping. For example, if I compare this with this one, right? So here my end range is not greater than the start range of this, that means it's not overlapping, right? And it has to be greater than or equal to, for example, in this case the end range is 8 and here the start range is also 8, right? So it's just borderline overlapping, right? So that's why it should be greater than or equal to. So that's what we are doing here. We are checking whether the interval of 1, right? So this is a array with the 0th index as the start range and first index as the end range, right? So I'm checking whether the interval of 1 is greater than or equal to whatever is my current range, right? So interval of I means within this list of intervals, whatever is my current interval, and 0th index. 0th index is the start index, right? So for each of this range, I'll check the start index and I'll compare that with my end index of my new interval. If my new interval's end index is greater than or equal to, that means it's overlapping here, right? So for each of this condition, in my temp array, in my start index, I'll store the min of my current temp start index. So initially I'm declaring this current temp start index same as new interval, right? So I'm comparing between this start index and for each of these ranges the start index of that, and I'm checking which one is the minimum, right? So this, at the end of this whole while loop, my temp of 0 will be the minimum start range among all these overlapping ranges, right? Whatever is this overlapping ranges, the min of that range will be stored in temp of 0. Similarly, temp of 1 will store the max of the end ranges of all this range intervals that are overlapping with my new interval. Okay, and this loop will end here in this case, because even though I is less than intervals dot length, but new interval of 1, right? That means the new interval of end range that I have, that is not greater than the start range of my next interval, right? Which is this in this case, right? So at that point this loop will end. So once that loops end, right, the final temp variable that I have, right, or the temp array that I have will have the merged array or a merged start and end range, right? So I can directly add this final temp into my result array, which is the result output. So this one, and after that, if I is still less than intervals dot length, I know those later on ranges will always be in non-overlapping after this, right? So whatever is the later on ranges, that we can directly add into my output array, right, until my I is less than length. Okay, so even though this is listed as a hard problem in LeetCode, I think it's one of the easier problem. So let's write the code for this. So I'm writing the code in Java. So first I'm declaring I as 0, and let's say length equal to my intervals dot length. So the first case was I need to check all the ranges that are not overlapping at the start, right? I can use that as is in my result array, right? So for result array, I'll declare a list of int, and now I'll go over the first ranges which are not overlapping, right? I'll directly add that into my list. So list dot add intervals of I. So till this point we have added all the starting ranges that are not overlapping, right? After that I'll declare a temp array and assign it with the new interval. So temp is same as new interval, and now I'll check while I is less than length, and my new interval of 1. So here if you check here, the end range of my new interval should be greater than or equal to the start range of the interval ranges, right? Only then it is overlapping. So till it is overlapping, we have to check for each and every range and try to merge it with this particular condition, right? Min and max condition. So that's what we are doing here. Interval of 1 should be greater than or equal to, if it is greater than or equal to intervals of I and 0 over in the loop, and temp of 0 is equal to mat.min of the current value in the temp of 0 or value in I of 0, right? So in the current intervals start range or between temp of 0, whichever is the minimum, use that value. Similarly for temp of 1, I'll do max. This is the end range, right? So for the end range, I need to check whatever is the current value in temp of 1 with the end interval for that particular range, intervals of I, right? And I'll increment value of I here. So once I'm done with this, I know that my temp variable will now have the merged value for the overlapping intervals, right? So I can directly add that in my list. And after that, so at the end, the list will have all the merged elements and non-overlapping elements. So now I need to return the list, but it should be returned as an int array, right? So I can return list dot array new int list dot size, and the columns are 2. This way it should work. Basically I'm doing here, I am converting the list to 2 array and passing the size of that new int array. Okay, so yeah, this is the code, and let's run the code and see whether it works for the test case. Okay, here it's 1325. Okay, here I, instead of checking the end range, I did the other way. That's why. Let's run it now. Okay, so this is good. Let's submit. Okay, so the result is accepted. And the complexity of this will be, since we are going over only once through the whole intervals array, so the complexity of this will be O of n, where n is the length of the array. Thank you all. Please do subscribe and hit the like button. If you have any questions, please comment down in the comment section below. Thank you.